Hello, guys. Welcome back to Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Kristin Chadwick, your podcast coach. Here I am. I am helping Christian women amplify their voices and step into courage through podcasting. This week, I want to talk to you about how to know if your podcast is ready to grow. Podcast Auditing Checklist. I have been having numerous conversations with podcasters this week, this month. I feel like a lot of podcasters are coming up to the surface and they are ready and anxious to grow, anxious in a good way, maybe inspired to grow. And I love this because I think it shows that there's a lot of opportunity for growth out there in the podcasting space. And so today I want to talk to you if you are a current podcaster. So if you've released one, two, three episodes and hundreds of episodes, this episode is for you because it is for somebody who wants to grow their podcast. And it starts with somebody else's ears listening in on your podcast. I want to read to you a Proverbs. Proverbs 15:31 says, "If you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. If you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding." And you guys, we all need feedback. And if you're like me, a recovering people pleaser, it's hard to receive feedback, but feedback helps us grow and mature and really hone in on our craft. I remember a time when I was inside of a podcasting group, and the coach inside of there offered to give me feedback. And if I'm honest, I my first reaction was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so scary." But because he was such a great coach and consultant and he was kind, I could trust him with his feedback to help me improve my podcast. And I still think of his feedback today. And it's really helped me to grow as a podcaster. And quite frankly, I really needed to hear his feedback. And so today, that's what I'm talking about is feedback and podcast auditing. So what are those things? And you can get feedback from fellow podcasters like inside of our membership. We're going to be implementing coming into 2025 where once a month we're going to listen to each other's podcasts. We're going to pick one podcaster to be in the hot seat that month and give feedback, really good constructive feedback, and have other ears listening in. You can also find feedback from just another podcaster on your own, or you can have a podcast consultant like myself to help you with an outside perspective on your podcast. And a well edited podcast is key, not edited, excuse me. A well audited podcast is the key to growth, impact, and reaching the right audience. So this week, I even had a one of my brand new podcasters. He has about a 5 to 6 minute show that he puts out every week. And he sent me an email and he said, "Kristin, I got some feedback and I really want feedback from you. I would love to hear where am I doing well and what can I improve?" And I loved that really like a deep hunger to grow. And so I took the time to go back and listen again to the episodes and really dug into, okay, he's really hungry to grow. So how can I help him get even more clear on how to do his podcast well? And so it just inspired me to record this episode and also to offer to you guys a free podcast audit. And I will take 30 minutes to sit down with you and go over a checklist of what I think would be some tweaks here and there to help you in your podcast to grow. So, I want to share another little story real quick. He had this podcaster in particular had a huge heart for their listener, and it was a very specific kind of listener. I'm not gonna give details because it might give it away, but I couldn't tell just by their title who it was for. It was a very vague title. I didn't have a very clear, "This is what we talk about." And what we did was we ended up tweaking the podcast name just a bit, and even just the tweaking of her title to include who was she for or he for, and who and what did they do to help. So tips or what were those keywords that they were doing to answer the problem that their listener was asking. So you've got to realize that podcasters, there is an opportunity, even just for little small tweaks, that can make a huge difference in the quality of your podcast, in the engagement of your podcast, and in the reach of your podcast. And if you're anything like me or the podcasters that I serve on a daily basis, we want to grow. We want to expand. We want to create that kingdom impact and create visibility. So, if this is going to help you, actually, I do know this will help you, is going through this checklist and coming and sitting down with me. I would love to help you in this. So, today I'm going to just walk through the podcast auditing checklist that we are going to go through. And whether you or decide to meet with me on a Zoom, or if you just take this and you work it over into your own podcast or take with a friend to do this together, please do, because we all want to grow. I just encourage you to be brave like I had to be, and ask for somebody to give me some feedback on what can I do better as a podcaster. So I encourage you to be brave, have some courage. I promise I will be kind, and whoever is in your sphere that you can do this with, I encourage you to be kind to each other too. But let's go over all of this. Okay, so your podcast auditing checklist. Number one, your title. We're going to look at, just like I gave the example of the previous podcaster, we're going to look at your title. Is it clear on who you're serving? And if not, how can we tweak it? So I'm going to give you an example of this podcast. This podcast, Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs, very much plainly says what it's for and who it's for. This is what I do. I do podcast coaching for kingdom entrepreneurs. Do I serve all people? Absolutely. Is it specifically this podcast, the flavor of kingdom entrepreneurs? Is it rooted in my faith and how it plays out in my entrepreneurship and podcast coaching? Absolutely. So that is very, very clear. That's an example. What my podcast used to be called was holistic podcasting. And for those of you that don't know my background story, that's going to make no sense whatsoever. What is holistic podcasting? So if you don't know the backstory, that would be very confusing. But the backstory is I had a previous podcast called Holistic Hearts, and that was the original podcast that I had. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to create a second podcast called Holistic Podcasting. So it made sense in my head, but it didn't make sense to anybody else's head. So that is why I changed it to a very clear keyword title: Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. My creativity can go into my actual episodes. My title can be simple, basic, and keywords. So look at your title. Is it clear? Is it including keywords? Is it including who you're serving? Second thing we'll look at is your podcast art tile or your cover art. What does your art look like? Is it portraying what you need it to portray? Say you are let's see. Say you are a business coach and you're sitting, it's a picture of you sitting with trees and leaves and um, like that's your design. Now, at first glance, it would look like you're more of a like herbologist or, or whatever you call it. So it would be confusing. So if you're a fitness coach, are there weights in the background? Are you in a workout uniform? Are you a coach? Are you coaching somebody? Are you in front of your computer coaching somebody? Uh, if you don't want to do a picture, then how is your art reflecting what you talk about? So if I'm talking about podcasting, then I could put a mic on mine. If I'm not talking about podcasting, then I would suggest you don't do a mic unless that's something that you coach on is podcasting. So you don't have to do a picture. You could do bold fonts. You could do a photo that's faded in the background with very clear lettering. I would steer away from any kind of tiny cursive so that people can easily read it. Just remember, people are opening up their podcast apps and they are going into the search bar and they are searching for your keywords and they are going to look for a little tile and that's going to be their very first impression of you, and it is going to be tiny. I think it's like 3 millimeters in height and, uh, oh my gosh, you guys, just the width and the height of a tile is very, very small, so we wanna make sure that it is clear, that it is pointing to what you do, and they are intrigued by it. So, that's the next thing. The next area that we'll look at is the podcast description. And in your podcast description, you are going to want to make sure that you include SEO keywords. And I will teach you how to find those words. And it is a very specific way that you can go about doing this. And we want to make sure that that's included inside of our podcast description. The episode titles, we want to make sure that our SEO words and keywords are inside of there. And as I keep saying all of these SEO keywords and um, making sure that we use those right words, there is a very specific way that I teach my membership participants and also my other podcasters in other various mastermind groups that we walk through this scenario. So if you book that call with me, I will give you a little tidbit on how to do this well and how to find the right keywords for podcasts. So check your episode titles, make sure it's answering a problem that your listener is asking. Then we're going to talk about your frequency. Are you being consistent? How much are you releasing your episodes? What days are you releasing your episodes? What time are you releasing your episode? Do you need to increase your frequency? Do you need to decrease your frequency? One client of mine was very sporadic in posting an episode, and simply having them create weekly content nearly doubled their downloads, which is crazy. And also points to people love consistency in their life and the rhythm of weekly content. So for those of you asking, how often should I publish an episode? Weekly, my friend. Weekly, weekly. So in this particular instance, it was this person did all interviews. So I said, you know what? Why don't you, on the weeks that you don't have interviews, do a solo episode? So that's what did it, my friends. Their download numbers doubled simply from that specific strategy. The next thing we're going to look at is your audio check. How does your mic sound? Do you even use a mic? How's your editing? Does your editing sound okay? Is your intro short enough that it is not long, a 2-minute intro into the episode that you lose people? All of those things we're going to check over. We're going to look at your content because content is still king. If you have good intriguing content, you're going to keep the attention of your people. Do you need to bring in other people to interview? Do you need to just do solos, like I said with my previous client? We're going to look at how are you promoting your podcast? So, how are you telling people about your episodes? So, all of those things we're going to go through on a checklist together on a one-on-one call, you and me, and we're going to go through your title, your cover art, your podcast description, your episode titles, frequency, your audio, your content, and your promotion as much as we can in those 30 minutes. And I will help you succeed as a podcaster to grow your show because I really do care. I want, especially as Christian people who are using their voices to create impact, to bring hope, to bring joy, to bring peace, to bring strategy, to bring growth, to bring abundance, to bring growth, all of these things. I want to help you get out there and be visible. And it could be a minor tweak in your podcast that could help turn the page for you to increase and hit and be available to that next listener in your world. So, um, I think the power of getting somebody else's eyes on your content, on your podcast, is going to be so helpful, and it is going to help you not overlook the areas that might need improvement. And just like when we are working out and we are, doing a squat, we don't quite know where we may need a little bit of tweaking in our form until we have somebody looking at us in our form who is trained to look at your movement. So that's why we hire a personal trainer to watch us and our posture. How are we bending our legs? Are we bending or are we tilting our hips? And so that's what it's going to do is this feedback into your podcast. It's going to help you hear from other people where maybe you can't quite see on your own, and that is okay. So, again, I'm offering this free podcast audit call where we're going to go through this checklist. I'm going to give you personalized feedback and we're going to map out a good strategy on how you can implement it moving forward and then also talk about how can we continue to grow your podcast and to come up with strategies to again work together to grow our kingdom faith forward or faith in the background podcasts and change lives. So I encourage you to check out in the show notes down below, click that link in Calendly, schedule a free podcast auditing call, and can't wait to help you grow your show. Thanks, you guys. Have a great week, and I will see you on the next episode.